Something you are now very familiar with is how to send output to the console. But what if you wanted to receive input from the console? There's a special library for that we can bring into our file and use the methods that it has to very easily interact with the console this way. It's called readline-sync. Now, if we go over to our package.json file, we can't see any evidence here that readline-sync has already been installed. So we need to use npm to install it. I'm going to say npm install readline-sync. And before I hit enter here, let me point out that I'm in the root directory because that's where the package.json file lives. That's where I need to be. So I'll install it. It will install it in that same file. We can check that now and see that it is right here at the bottom. So there's a new object here for dependencies and readline-sync is included. So now we have it available to us in any file that we want that's in the rest of the project. Now, something I should do before I forget is to navigate to the folder where we are currently working. There we go. So now in order to be able to make use of readline-sync, we need to import it at the very top. You always do this at the very top of the file. And because I'm working with common JavaScript modules, I actually need to use a specific syntax that involves using a function called require. So I'm going to start by creating a constant. A constant is a lot like a variable, but it actually can't be changed once you set it. So I will set it to a name that I choose. You can call this anything you want, and it's going to assign the readline-sync library to this constant name. So I'm just going to call it input, and I'll say require readline-sync. Now it's available to us under the name input. So the idea here is that we're going to create an interactive form for astronauts to check in with NASA. And this is going to involve back and forth where sometimes we're printing to the console and sometimes we're accepting input back from the console after asking a question. Let's just start at the top and create a header for our little interaction here. So the astronaut is in the shuttle, they log in to mission control, and they have this little interface they're dealing with. So now we're ready to ask the pilot for their name so that we can greet them with it. Let's set up a variable to store the response and then ask the question. So I'm going to use input that I created up here at the very top, and I'm going to take advantage of this method that's part of the library called question. And what it does is it prints something to the console, just like console.log does, but it also waits for the user to provide an answer, and then it will return it and store it in that variable we set up. Once I've done that, I can use it right away. So let's say, welcome aboard, Commander. And I use a placeholder in my template literal here to insert the pilot name. And let's see how that goes. Let's just go that far. We're going to go ahead and run this now. It says, welcome to mission control, enter pilot name. And it's sitting there waiting for me to put this in. So I'll say William Raker. And it says, welcome aboard, Commander William Raker. And then we notice it goes back to the prompt because it executes and finishes. Because that's all we've done so far. We just have 3 lines of code here. So let's keep going. We can make this more interactive and keep asking for other information. Let's ask for a number this time. We're going to ask for the number of orbits. So I'll start another variable and ask the question from input. But this time I'm going to use questionInt. How many orbits have you completed? And what that's going to do for us is ensure that the user can only give us a valid integer back. If they give us anything else, it's going to ask them again until they finally get it right. So it's some built-in validation that comes from this library. It's very useful. You always should test it out and make sure that it's working so that if the user does something unexpected, you can account for it and it's not going to mess up your program. Now, I don't really intend to print anything ultimately here, but I am going to log orbit count temporarily just so we can see the result come back for testing purposes. All right, William Riker. How many orbits have you completed? Let's say 3, and I'm going to spell it out, which is not an integer. And it says input valid number, please. How many orbits have you completed? And what if I said 4.5? It would round it down to 4. I guess technically that's truncating it down to 4. So that's an interesting little thing to know about that. If you put in a valid number, but it's not an integer, apparently it's just going to truncate it. But it definitely didn't let us use a string. So that was just for testing. I'm going to remove that. Let's do another one. Let's ask for the current velocity. And this time we're going to validate it as a decimal number or a float. So I will say, let ship velocity Mach, because remember, we always want to indicate the unit in the name of our variable. Input.questionFloat. And the question I will ask is enter current velocity, and in parentheses, in Mach. And then we'll console.log the ship velocity Mach variable just so that we can see it come out. Okay, let's say we have 8 orbits. Our current velocity is, and I'm going to break it on purpose, 25 as a string. Input valid number, please. And so then I will say 25.4. Okay, and it came back, so we definitely stored it properly. Good. So we now have the ability to ask the user in the console 3 different questions and get 3 different answers back and store them for use. So we're starting to build a whole program. The last thing we're going to do here, because we're not going to spend too much more time on this, is just print a final multi-line summary that uses all of the data that's been captured. So let's set up a log. I'm going to open up a template literal here, and I will start putting line by line the information that I want to have here. So we're going to start with a status update summary, and we'll say the pilot is, and use a placeholder for pilot name. Orbits completed, and we'll put orbit count. And then we'll say current speed. Oh, and I actually need to put the word Mach in front of it, and then we'll say ship velocity Mach. Okay. Status ready for deep space maneuvers. Okay. Let's give this entire thing a run from top to bottom. Enter pilot name, William Riker. Let's say we've completed 9 orbits. Enter current velocity in Mach, how about 24.5? And we see our final report. Pilot, William Riker, orbits completed 9, current speed Mach 24.5, and status ready for deep space maneuvers. Okay, so that's really all there is to it. Just keep using whichever one of these is the best fit. Something I forgot to mention, I had mentioned that question always returns a string. It turns out that with questionInt and questionFloat both, they don't return strings, they return numbers, which is why they require a number and will actually validate for that. So if we were to have logged the types of those, we would see that those were numbers. So before I go, as always, I'm going to observe best practices by making a git commit. I'll check my status and see I actually have 2 things that are changed here. And this is going to bring up something interesting you may not have seen before. If I say git add dot to say add all, and when I check my status, this is why I always check my status after I stage, because I might suddenly be surprised to say, oh, only one of those got staged, and I meant for both of them to be staged. And the reason is because it's actually 4 levels back in our file structure. I'm in the exercises folder and package.json is out here at the root. So there's a couple different ways I can do it. I could change directory and go back to the root and then add it, or I can just copy that entire path and say git add. And then when I check my status again, I can see that they both have been added. And then I can make my commit. So for you, you can practice by doing another exercise here and writing an interactive program. Because readline-sync may already be installed for you in the code base when you get it, there's some instructions here that all you have to do is run npm install to make sure that the package lock.json file is created for you that has the dependencies in it for your local machine, because everybody's machine is a little bit different. Okay, that is all I've got. I will see you in the next one.